Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like months-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly.
Hello and welcome back to the ROKER RAPPORT Extra podcast. Last time you heard from me would have been the Deadline Day podcast, I think, which started fantastically. I honestly recommend you to go back and listen to the intro when I didn't realise I was live. But it's also a really good podcast to listen to because the Will Grigg thing happened, and it just happened so dramatically. And he's ready to make his debut on Saturday. I think we've all been quite looking forward to that. But we come in on the back of a nervy win against Wimbledon. I kind of hoped we'd maybe perform a little better than we did, but 3 points is 3 points. We're still well in the mix, especially with those games in hand. Following this Oxford game, I think we've got 3 home games in 7 days: Blackpool, Accrington and Gillingham. You'll be pleased to know I won't be doing an extra pod for every one of those games, just the weekend game, which will be Accrington on the Friday. But to preview our game on Saturday, we've got a returning guest. We've got Simon from the Fence End Pod. Simon, how are you doing? Are you well?
Yeah, not too bad at all.
Good. I was listening back to our podcast that we had at the start of the season, and we had 2 of you on. And I remember you saying, obviously, it was a really poor start for you, 6 defeats in a row, but you felt like it was a false position at the bottom of the league. And I think you definitely showed that at the Stadium Light. It was one of the better teams I've seen at the Stadium this season. But then I looked at your recent results and your league table position. Recent results, not so bad. League position, you're still down there. So what's happened since we last played each other?
We're not in a false position now. I think early in the season, you can make excuses for where you are with the transfer deadline and squads not quite being ready. But I think this far through the season, we're where we deserve to be. We're an odd side in that we can play brilliantly one week and awful the next. You know, you look back at the last couple of home games, we've beaten Portsmouth and we're 2-0 up against Barnsley. Really should have seen the game out. But for a defensive error for their second goal, we'd have had 6 points against the top 2 sides as they were at the time. We're an odd side. We can play brilliantly, like I say, one week, poorly the next, but we are now where we deserve to be because we're not ruthless enough, and it's as simple as that, really.
So I was going to say, what is it that has put you in that position? But you've sort of just answered it there. And as many people will know, I do the 3 key players to look at. And if I'm honest, I try to get one from each position. And I looked for sort of a centre forward and immediately noticed you haven't got anyone who seems to be doing anything of the sort of scoring goals. It seems to be coming from James Henry. Yeah. So has that been the main problem? It's not so much been that you've had poor performances or just no one to put it in the onion bag?
Well, that's it. We started the season with John O'Beaker, who had been there the previous season. So, he wasn't a player that Karl Robinson necessarily wanted. And alongside him, Jamie Mackey, who came in with a bit of an injury, wasn't really playing. So we had 2 guys who prolific is not a word you put to either of them. You know, they work hard and that, but neither of them are particularly prolific goal scorers. But then there's always that, if you've got one person scoring the goals, they're an easy person to mark out the game. I think we kind of spread the goals around. Certainly James Henry scoring a lot of goals. And we've got maybe 3 or 4 others that can certainly chip in. Gavin White and Jordan Graham, that's Marcus Brown. Players that could chip in with 6 or 8 or 10 goals a season. So we haven't got a centre forward that you've got to worry about. We've got sort of attacking midfielders, wingers, which is where the goals are coming from this season.
And one thing I did notice, you're talking about the attacking midfielders, and I was really impressed with Oxford at the Stadium this season. I think many people said the same thing. I think, obviously, we got ourselves back into it under with 10 men. I remember Max Power got sent off a little bit contentiously. You can swing either way with that. But it was a good performance. And there was a guy called Ricky Hill, who obviously, I think, scored the free kick, didn't he? But he's come back. Yeah. Ricky Holmes, sorry. He's gone back, hasn't he? He's injured a lot.
Yeah, we had him from Sheffield United. He's one of those players that always played well against us whenever he was at, I think he was at Northampton and at Charlton, and always did well against us. So when he came in, I think a lot of fans were sort of pretty positive about him. And when he played well, but he's had a real back problem that's really bugged him. And I guess from a financial point of view, we're looking at every penny that's being spent. And if you've got a player that you're spending quite a lot of money on as a loan player who's not playing, I think the decision was made to free up a wage to get, other players in. And he's, although exceptionally talented player, we're not struggling for players in that sort of position, that attacking midfielder, wide player. We've got, you can argue, sort of 4 or 5 players who could play that role.
We were discussing before, sort of via message, about the way your midfield's played this season. You mentioned James Henry before. I think James Henry's been, from the outside looking in, one year, if not the best, one of those people you've been able to rely on for a couple of seasons now. But I was reading, I think it was the Oxford Gazette, he's dropped a little bit deeper, but you said to me it's a bit more fluid. What formation is Robinson taking on this season, and how's that benefited James Henry? Because his goal tally, if he's playing deeper, it's actually got 10, I think, this season.
Yeah, he's playing, in the past he's played wide, but certainly this season he's playing more sort of as an attacking midfielder, sort of number 10, if you like, Robinson tends to sort of play with, a straight back 4, 2 deeper midfielders in John Messinio and Cameron Brannigan, 2 wingers, whether that's Gavin White and Jordan Graham, or Gavin White, Marcus Brown, and 1 up front. And then James Henry is the player that sort of sits in behind the centre forward. And it's, like I say, it is quite fluid, because Messinio can come out and carry the ball out from a deeper midfield position, and Cameron Brannigan is the sort of busy player that ties it all together. And if we go from that sort of 4-2-3-1, occasionally on Saturday, second half we went 4-4-2, and then Henry played a little deeper than he would normally. But I think it suits the players we've got, in that they're all, that certainly those attacking sort of 4 or 5 players are all happy to interchange, move around. We're not a particularly rigid set sort of formation up front. The 4 and maybe the 2 deeper midfielders are fairly rigid, but then around that there's a lot of movement.
With you talked about the midfield, and Brannigan was one that actually did stick out, and he's someone you mentioned as well when we were just sort of chatting off, I was going to say off camera, off audio, shall we say. Brannigan is an interesting one, because he's actually someone I was aware of. He was at Liverpool, and I remember he played about 8 games or so, and I think Jurgen Klopp mentioned something like, he said he was a midfielder that has everything. But with all due respect to the league that we're in, Liverpool and League One are very different. But from a League One perspective, what can Cameron Brannigan bring to your team, or what has he brought to your team?
I think when he plays well, the team plays well. It's early in his career. He's only a young lad, didn't play a lot of games until he joined us, and he's pretty much been ever present. He's chipped in with 2 or 3 absolute screamers as well. Goal, he's got a goal threat. And you're right, when he was at Liverpool, there was a lot of it's a lot of talk for a lot of players, but there was talk of the likes of Barcelona looking at him, keeping tabs on him, and you do wonder sometimes whether that's agents talking players up. But he's certainly got a hell of a lot of ability. He tackles well, he gets around the pitch, he can pick a pass brilliantly, and I think a lot of these players that are in academies at Premier League clubs who are getting nowhere near first team on a regular basis, it sometimes takes them a month or 2, or perhaps even longer, to get used to the rigours of playing regular men's football, if you like, rather than under 18, under 23 academy stuff, of that, that physicality. But right from the start, you could tell he was a decent player. It wasn't, we've had 1 or 2 lads, we had a couple of lads last season from Man City who just looked absolutely out of their depth. For whatever reason, whether they weren't quite mentally ready for it or physically, but he looks a tough little lad who will hopefully go far in the game.
And talking about Liverpool Academy graduates, there's this one man that is probably going to play for you on Saturday that I probably know a little bit more about. But before I go on to Jerome Sinclair, what is the Oxford perspective on that? Because the weird thing is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember on transfer deadline day when I was scrolling through stuff, James Vaughan, God bless him, was due to go. And I'll be honest, I wouldn't wish James Vaughan on many of my worst enemies. But Jerome Sinclair's kind of quite similar in the sense, but maybe that's been a bit harsh. But who would you have preferred out of the two? And what are your thoughts on Jerome Sinclair from what you've heard and what you've seen?
I think of the two, most of the fans would have said to go for James Vaughan. Now I get what you're saying in you wouldn't wish him on a worst enemy, but if you look at he's played most of his career at a higher level than League One. The one season he had at League One 2 years ago, or season and a half ago, was at Bury, and Bury were a side that just avoided relegation, and he scored 20 odd goals. So at this level, you kind of look at him and think he can play easily at this level. And I think Pompey have got a decent player. He was he spent a couple of days training with us and around the squad and met everybody. And I guess he didn't sign, whether that's the agent just sort of saying, hang on a bit, let's see what else comes in. You can't blame the guy if he's got a choice between us and Portsmouth and no real sort of emotional tie to either club. Then you're going to go for a club that are at the top of the table, not one at the bottom. It's totally understandable that he's made that decision. Jerome Sinclair, he played on Saturday, and it was, I think a lot of fans, let's see what he's got. Let's not make too quick a decision. The first thing he did, unfortunately, was completely, I don't even remember, there was a classic Robin Van Persie where he tries to shoot and his standing foot just knocks the ball away, and he did that. It fell flat on his arse, and everyone's going, oh no.
Oh, Jerome.
But then the next thing he did was get their centre-half sent off because Jerome made a really good run, absolutely skinned their centre-half who just pulled him back, got the red card. The next thing he did was blaze one over. But I don't know. I thought he showed an awful lot of good movement. He was quick. He was constantly wanting the ball. He didn't hide, and you kind of sometimes think players, okay, it didn't work brilliantly for him in the first few minutes of the game, but actually he never stopped looking for the ball. He was constantly on the shoulder of the centre halves, and I give the guy a chance. Watford paid £4 million for him. Then clearly there's something there that people in football have seen an ability there. And I go back to that. If he spent a lot of time in, playing academy football, they get to an age, he's 22. If he'd have been at a smaller club from the start of his career, he'd have probably got 100 games under his belt by now.
That could be quite a big thing. And he was actually really nice about us in I think it was in the Oxford Mail or something. Somewhere he was quite nice about Sunderland as a club, because I think it would be fair to say he didn't have the best of times here, but it actually started quite well. He came on in the opening day of the season against Charlton, and he was very direct, and he actually changed the game in our favour a little bit. And I think most people actually came out of the Charlton game more impressed with Jerome Sinclair than they were with Josh Maguire. And then 6 months down the line, you could see the confidence sort of drained from him a little bit, and he only scored 2 whilst he was here, and one of them was a penalty in the Checker Trade Trophy. The other one was actually a really good goal against Peterborough, back when Peterborough were sort of near the top of the league. But Jerome Sinclair was a funny one because he did actually get a lot of standard sort of poor, in my opinion, poor Twitter comments when he left. A lot of people kind of criticised him, saying how useless he was. But you mentioned something he never hid. And he runs the channels well. He doesn't hide. And I think he's possibly unlucky that he's played for 2 Premiership clubs as an academy player or as a young player and not really had any exposure. I mean, when he scored against Peterborough, it was actually his first league goal ever. And even I was taken back by that because I felt like it was a name that's been around a while. I thought, well, surely he scored in some sort of cup competition, but if I'm led to believe it was his first goal. Whereas James Vaughan, I don't think there's any love lost between ourselves and James Vaughan. You can probably search Twitter and see a bit of the banter in inverted commas between us both. We're not a big fan, or I'm certainly not a big fan of James Vaughan. I think personally, from watching them both over the past season, yes, in different divisions, I think you got the best of the two. But the big worry is that he'll end up having an absolute stormer on Saturday, Jerome Sinclair, which is a huge worry. Is he likely to play up front?
Well, possibly, yeah. I mean, Mackie's been playing because he's the only centre forward. He's been playing regularly against Burton. Sinclair started the game, and I'm trying to think if he finished it. I think he came off right at the very end, possibly. So I think why not? We've so often had players that we've let go or have come back to haunt us. So we're fingers crossed, touch wood, that it's going to happen in our favour. That a player who didn't have a great time at another club, within a couple of games of him joining us, we're playing that club, and yeah, let's hope it's the boots on the other foot.
And I've just remembered something. Completely out of the blue, talking about just Jerome Sinclair and players that have played for both clubs. And I remember how our big loving about Chris Maguire at the start of the season. It's a weird one with Chris Maguire because we signed Lewis Morgan during the transfer window, which looks like a great signing from Celtic. You've got McGeady's really rose to prominence since we last spoke. And Chris Maguire's not really getting a look in, but he's sitting on about 5 or 6 goals. So I don't actually know if he's going to play on Saturday, but if I remember rightly, you were worried about him performing well at the start of the season, and that was the first time he had a really bad game, and he should have been sent off, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on Chris Maguire after that game? Because I know you love him in general, but...
yeah, we still do. He's. I think it was yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of the last time we played Swindon, and obviously our great rivals, and down at their place. And there's some great video footage of him after the game winding up the Swindon fans and the Swindon players, and we just absolutely love him. And I think, he's a player. I'm trying to think. I think he scored for Bury when he was at Bury and they played us, and he didn't celebrate. I think there's a real affection between him. He had a great time when he was with us, and we absolutely love him. And I'm sure, if he plays, he's a great wind-up merchant. I don't know if he's been doing that for you guys, but certainly for us, yeah, absolutely. And I think as a fan, you love it when it's your player doing it. You hate it when it's somebody else. I think perhaps he's got a little bit too much respect for Oxford to do it to us, but I wouldn't put it past him. It would be hilarious. But then that's what you get with him. He's a great player. He can win a game in an instant. He can be anonymous, but then do something that just absolutely nobody else on the pitch can do.
And I think that there was a real point that Charlie Methven made. Really oddly enough, he was in like a pub near the ground before the Luton game, and we were discussing signings in the window, and he said, who's been your favourite player that we brought in? And I says, well, even though he's not really playing, and he actually scored that day, says Chris Maguire. I just love him, like big wind-up merchant, exactly what I sort of like, and I know he's been off the ball. And I said, he hasn't been playing recently. I says, but I just really like him as a person. And obviously, Charlie said, when we had him in Oxford, it was very similar. He says the thing with him at Oxford is, at the time, he was probably our best or one of the best players, and he had to play every single week. He says the beauty of him being at Sunderland is you've got McGeady, and you've got now you've got Lewis Morgan, you've got Lyndon Gooch, you've got loads of options in his place where he doesn't need to play every week, because, like I say, the same game he came in against Luton, and I don't think he'd played for a couple of weeks, and he came in and he banged the goal, and he got sent off at the end, but it got rescinded. It wasn't purposeful. Thankfully, it got rescinded. But yeah, you'll be pleased to know that his wind up is, if anything, accelerated. We call him the king. We call him the king here.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see whether he does play. Obviously, it'll be a decent crowd there, and I think he loves that. He likes, I think, being the centre of attention. He thrives on it. Some players, it gets too much for them. For him, you can tell he's got that. I was going to say arrogance. I think arrogance is perhaps not the right word, because he's got the ability to back it up. And you kind of think, no, it's confidence in his own ability, and a kind of a little bit of a sort of a devil streak in him. But he's doing that with ability, right? You see too many players who think they've got it made who really haven't, but he has. He's got the ability to back up that arrogance.
Now, when it comes to Sunderland versus Oxford games, I said to you both last time we played, I said, do you remember the last time you came to the Stadium of Light? And The other, I think, was it Fraser last time?
Yeah.
And Fraser kind of went, and you went, yeah, 7-0. And I was like, yeah, but here's a strange fact. Do you remember the significance of the last time we played at Oxford, and why was it significant?
If my memory serves me right, was it the first ever pay-per-view game?
100% correct. And it was 0-0.
Yeah, I'm not sure quite. Yeah, it wasn't money. Wasn't value for money. That was it. No,
it was nine quid if I remember correctly. It was played on a Sunday,
right,
during our 105-point season, which I mean that was pretty good for us. But it was an absolutely dire game, absolutely dire. Yeah. Are you expecting quite a big crowd on Saturday?
Yeah, I think we're aiming for a 10,000 crowd, which for us is a decent turnout. I think since we've been back in the league at the Kassam, if you take out sort of Boxing Day matches and just league games, then I think it's only happened sort of 5 or 6 times. So it's considering how poorly we've been playing, how the fans aren't necessarily sort of behind the club because of all sorts of stuff with chairman and the manager's not that popular. I think if we can get 10,000, it'd be a hell of an achievement for the commercial side and for people sort of pushing this game to get a decent crowd, because like I said earlier, depends which side turn up. I just hope that we put on a decent performance, and some of those sort of irregular fans, if you like, will come back, because too often we do this and get a big crowd and play awfully.
We've done that at Sunderland many a time as well, man. Yeah. I'm just looking through the lineup of the last time we played each other. It was the 27th of February, funnily enough, 1999. So almost 20 years to the day.
Crikey.
Sunderland's team, I remember, I could probably read these off. You've got Quinn and Phillips up front, Johnson, Summerby, Macon, Holloway, Sorensen, Williams, Melville, Butler, and McCann and Johnson. Oxford, there's some names that really stick out here. You've got Joey Beecham.
Yeah. Dean
Windass.
Dino, yeah.
Kevin Francis.
Super Kev.
Yeah, both Super Kevs, yeah.
He's now a Mountie. He lives in Canada and he's a Mountie now, Kevin Francis.
What?
Seriously, yeah, he's a Mountie. Don't think he needs a horse though. He'd get on the horse without, jumping.
Not at all. Then you've got Phil Gilchrist, who I actually really weirdly remember as did he have a skinhead? Did he play in the middle? Am I imagining that?
No, short hair. He was a centre half. He had 2 spells with us, and was at Leicester as well.
You had Paul Gerrard in goal.
Yeah.
Mark Watson.
Yeah, Canadian international, I think he was.
Nicky Banger.
Yeah.
Les Robinson.
Yeah.
Paul Powell.
Yeah, local lad.
And one of our local lads, Martin Gray.
Yeah.
Martin Gray, who last time I seen him was manager at Darlington, but how times have changed. So it's been 20 years almost to the day since we played. And to think that was the first ever pay-per-view game.
Crikey.
Yeah. Things have gone south, not just for us as clubs, but
yeah, you kind of think, blimey, there's been some big pay-per-view events on TV sport recently, and that won't be remembered as one of them, will it?
the big memorable Oxford Sunderland. Yes. You reminded me actually. I wanted to speak about your manager a few times this season, and I don't know what it is. I think we're aware we're far from arrogant, and I would hate anyone to think that. I don't think we've been like that at all, both players, fans, or management. But there seems to be sometimes a bit of narkiness from certain teams, and I've never felt it more than Robinson. He just seemed to complain about everything, and I mean, obviously we had the Max Power red card at the stadium as well, and he really annoyed me, to be honest with you, Karl Robinson. He really, really got on my nerves. But I was thinking, I haven't heard many calls for his head, but you mentioned he's not the most popular, because for me, the team I see in Oxford and the players you've got compared to some of the other teams I've seen this season, you should be doing better, and that's got to go towards the manager. But how are the fans finding Robinson?
Yeah, I think he's kind of, he was at the Christmas games and the New Year game. We lost 3 on the trot over that Christmas period. I think after that 3-0 down at Plymouth, where we lost, I think he was sort of very close to potentially getting the boot. And I think there's a lot of fans that just haven't warmed to him at all. And he's a very emotional guy. And some of the post-match interviews, you really sort of want somebody to go, no, just give him another half an hour and then talk to him, because he really kind of goes off on one. Sometimes you just think, oh, you've seen a different game to the rest of us. You know, we played Barnsley a couple of games back where we were 2-0 up, and we really should have seen the game out. They were, you kind of look at a game like that and you think, hang on, they're nearly top of the table, and they just resorted to kicking us off the pitch. And if Karl Robinson had just focused on comments about them, the way they played and how the referees didn't really protect us or do their job properly, we'd have all been behind him, I think. But he went off on some rant about Brexit, and they've got a German manager and they can come over here and do what they like. And you're just thinking, what are you on about? You've kind of, it's this sort of, what's he talking about now kind of situation, where when he's been interviewed, say during the week or not straight after a game, he comes across really well. And I just think it's that immediacy of just after a game or during a game when he's really gets too emotional, and it reflects badly on him, I think, which is a shame, because you want that emotion, and like I say, when he's been, they've had extended interviews on the local radio and on club channels, he comes across really well. And I just think it's that emotional side, like you say, on the touchline as well. We played Peterborough recently, which I think he loved because Steve Evans was the bad guy in that game. But yeah, it was kind of unusual.
The bad guy.
Yeah, exactly. We don't like Steve Evans, but I think when you're emotional on the touchline like that, it doesn't really work, because if you're constantly on at the fourth official or the ref or the linesman, they switch off. They don't actually listen to what you're saying, and it doesn't actually sort of benefit your team. If you just maybe go off once or twice in a game, you're more likely to get a reaction that you want than just 90 minutes of moaning. He
didn't showcase himself very well, I thought, at the stadium. And I mean, it's easy to make a judgment in one game and his reaction and the way it was. Because, like I say, I was really, really impressed with Oxford at the stadium. I thought he's played really, really well. I think there's a podcast today, funnily enough, that has gone up. Well, not me, I'm never lucky enough, but the Connor, who does our regular podcast from the comfort of his studio, which he now goes to the bloody Academy of Light, which is all right for some. He interviewed Jack Ross yesterday, and he was talking about tactics and how you set up and things like that. And he said, which team has surprised you? And I think we mentioned Wickham, because Wickham played quite well when they came up. But Jack Ross, if I remember rightly, he said, Oxford. He's like, we kind of didn't expect them to press that high up the pitch. And for me, Oxford were the first team that kind of didn't show us any respect at all when you came to the stadium. And I'm so surprised to see where you're at. But then I looked at your results and I thought maybe they've just gone on a really bad run of form. But as it is, you actually pulled off a really great result, thanks for the one against Portsmouth, and then almost pulled out a dynamite result against Barnsley as well, and a good one nonetheless. So I suppose the question for me to sort of end on would be, how confident are you of putting us away on Saturday and starting that trajectory up the table, or do you think it's going to be pretty tough?
I think it's going to be tough between now and the end of the season, really. And we had a spell sort of October, November time where we picked up quite a lot of points, and I wouldn't say we were comfortably mid-table, because we weren't. But I think having something to get behind, whether that's going for playoffs, going for automatics, or avoiding relegation, I think brings the fans together. If you're sort of drifting in mid-table, everyone just sort of shrugs and it's like, well, there's nothing really to worry about. I think if we can get the fans, behind the side, ignore what's going on with ownership issues, and ignore, whether you like the manager or not, and get behind the team, because we really want to be in this division next season, I think there's something to get behind. Which team turns up against you guys on Saturday, I've no idea. It really is that kind of, perhaps we'll raise our game and play well, and because we're playing a side that will try and play a bit of football against us. You know, we've struggled a little bit against teams that just want to kick you up in the air. And I think, you know, maybe playing the better footballing sides, we've managed to play some better football, and it might go that way. You know, I know this might sound really odd. I wouldn't be surprised if we won 3-0. I wouldn't be surprised if we lost 3-0. I know that
yeah,
that's hedging my bets and sitting on the fence and whatever, but it really is at the moment. We're a real Jekyll and Hyde side.
So who would be, I always ask this question, I will get a prediction, but who would be the 3 players from Sunderland's team you think could damage you on Saturday? And I don't necessarily mean like the ones you think that are most talented. For example, if you've got a particular weak spot, I'd say right back, would it be our left winger that you'd be sort of nervous about? Which players are you not looking forward to coming up against?
Yeah, I think we've got kind of, our fullbacks are converted midfielders. Josh Ruffles, who's a local lad, plays left back. He's a real good squad player in that he's comfortable more or less anywhere midfield, left back, can play, you know, a little bit wide left as well. And Jamie Hansen, who we spent a lot of money for us on in the summer as a defensive midfielder, has been playing right back. So we've been at times a little bit susceptible sort of to tricky wingers, you know, because our fullbacks aren't. Oh no, you know. So I think that's perhaps. I'm not giving any trade secrets away because you guys will have scouted us well enough. But I think that's perhaps where we can be a little weak is to decent tricky wingers. But then we've got decent tricky wingers of our own. You know, Gavin White, I think, is a player. I know we were talking about sort of 3 players that were maybe key players for us. I think it depends on the day which players turn up. You know, sometimes it will be Gavin White who has the worldie. You know, it might be Marcus Brown who's been injured. He might come back in on Saturday. You know, we don't rely, I think, because we've not been great this season, so we can't point to a player who's had a brilliant season. We've got players that are going through little spells of decent form and then injured, and it's been inconsistent, very inconsistent.
As soon as you said that you're susceptible to coming up against tricky wingers there, I just straight away thought of Aidan McGeady.
Yeah.
And also Lewis Morgan, from what we saw from on Saturday, is really tricky as well. So if there's an issue there, that my confidence, and I think everyone's ears would have perked up a little bit there, if I'm honest with you. Do you? I mean, obviously we've brought in Grant Ledbetter, Lewis Morgan, and Will Grigg's got his debut on Saturday. Are you worried about Will Grigg? Do you think he may set the place on fire?
I think you have to be worried about a player. You know, you hear it's £4 million. I suppose that's £4 million if you get him ultimately into the Premier League. But you know, to be able to spend up to £4 million on a player is something we couldn't dream about. So you got to expect a player like that is going to be, you know, a real threat at this level. You know, he's clearly a very good player who. At this level, you know, your centre forwards need 2 or 3 chances. He doesn't. He'll be somebody that can score with the one chance that he gets. So yeah, worried about him if he plays.
Yeah, we're quite excited to see him because he seems to be the kind of player that at this level doesn't need too many chances. And I think losing Josh Maguire was bigger than I think some people are letting on. If I'm honest, that was huge. But the positivity is back with having him there, and obviously the song.
Yeah, it's a ready-made song, isn't there?
it's a great song. It's good fun. But just to sort of end, then, what's your prediction for Saturday?
Well, I've said 3-0, and either way, let's go for 3-3. I think it could be a high-scoring game. Let's go 3-0.
Jesus, I couldn't handle that. I'll take. I think we're going to go on a good run of form again. I'm going to take a 2-0. I think Will Grigg will get both.
We shall see.
I pray and I hope. But thanks for coming on again, Simon, mate. Always really good crack. Yeah. I hope your team doesn't do what they did last time and actually totally surprise me and put the shites at me, so to speak. I hope that you have a really horrible Saturday, but I hope you have a fantastic rest of the season. I hope that you do well. I hope that you manage to keep your heads above water. I'm sure you will. I think there's, from what I've seen, far enough quality to keep your heads above water. I just hope that you can do it. But we might speak again next season. We might not. It depends if we go up. It depends if you go down. It depends if neither happens. Or who knows? But I'm sure we'll cross paths.
Absolutely.
But thanks for coming on, Simon. Have a good rest of the night and a good week, mate. All right?
Thanks very much. Yeah. See you Saturday.
See you Saturday, bud.
Cheers.
So it's nice to have Simon back on. Really good crack. I had him and Fraser on earlier in the season. You can listen to that one if you want to. It's obviously a little while ago. Before Max Power had any red cards in his professional career. It was that long ago. But yeah, I think it's a tough game on Saturday. But I've been covering sort of all season. Maybe it's misplaced. But I do think we can go back to sort of a run of form where we can win a few games like we were a few months ago. I think we're going to have to start playing well again soon, because I think the performances haven't been particularly impressive despite some of the results coming. But, onwards and upwards. Enjoy the game on Saturday for those of you going. I'm missing Saturday again. I missed the game against Wimbledon. I was watching Hertha Berlin, taking in a bit of Bundesliga. You'll be pleased to know that it wasn't much better than League One football, but I'm sure that was just a one-off. I want to thank you very much for checking into the Extra Pod again. Thanks for listening to it. It's always appreciated the people that do. I'm pleased to see you all having a bit of a laugh at my Ellis Shorts 100 signings. Plenty of criticism. I think a few of you are taking it a little bit too seriously. It was just something that I thought would get a bit of a laugh, and it kind of has, thankfully. And I really hope you enjoy the Jan Kirchhoff podcast, which I did on Monday. I was in Germany, as I've just mentioned before, and I made the trip over to Magdeburg. I met him in a little coffee shop near the river in the city that he's living now, and I'm pleased to confirm he's an absolute gentleman, really, really lovely guy, and beautiful, beautiful blue eyes. As handsome as we all remember, but I'm sure that'll be out TBA, and I hope you enjoy that. I hope you continue to enjoy the ROKER Report Extra podcast, the normal podcast with Connor as well, with the luxury studio. So enjoy the rest of your evening, morning, noon, night, weekend, whenever you're listening to this. And I've been Graham. This has been the ROKER Report Extra podcast.
Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like month-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only. Please gamble responsibly.